What's up, guys, and welcome back to AncientCricsPodcast, Episode 2.
In this episode, we'll be talking about the Spanish exploration in the Americas. In case you don't remember, I'm Anna.
I'm Levi.
I'm Ada.
And I'm Ezra.
And our special guest for this week is Emmett.
Hi, I'm Emmett, and I've come to join. So wait, before we get into how the Spanish got into the Americas, we gotta know the reason why they actually went to explore. So at first, when they had a trade route to India through a land areas which the Turks controlled. Before the Turks. But then, so the Turks took over and controlled that area, which didn't let them through. So they wanted to find another way to get to India so they can continue on the spice trade. So then they sent out voyagers on ships to go look out for a new passage to India across the sea. But instead of getting to India, they got to the Americas. So when Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas, he thought they were all Indians and called them Indians, but he was actually with the Native Americans in America. So that's how the Spanish got there. And then after that, they continued and just colonized and exploited all the resources in South America and the Americas.
So the first explorer into the New Americas from Europe was Christopher Columbus in 1942.
Yeah.
1492.
1492. And he got there and thought they were Indians.
Yes.
He was actually under the sponsorship of Spain's monarchs, which was Ferdinand and Isabella.
And he actually argued that he didn't believe, like he kept believing that it was just India. Even whenever like other people would prove to him that it wasn't India, he was still like, no, it's India. So he just, even whenever he died, he still thought that it was just India.
He was
And-
never corrected.
He was never correct.
And didn't he, because he's from Spain, right? And didn't he have to go to Portugal to get sponsorship from Isabella and Ferdinand? Because Isabella and Ferdinand were Portuguese, right?
Were they?
I think so, if I remember correctly.
No, they were actually the king and queen of Spain.
They were.
So after like unsuccessfully trying to get support from like European monarchs, he went back to Spain, and they provided a crew for him.
So Christopher Columbus is the person that inspired many
explorers.
to like explore the world, right?
Yeah. So it was unsuccessful with the king of Portugal, England, and France, and then he went all the way back to Spain and was like, "Can you guys fund me?" And they said, "Yeah."
So then he went over to Spain, and he was like the catalyst to start all the other explorers wanting to go to America. So when he found this new land and they went back and told others, they sent more explorers out from all of Europe to go check out the new world.
And so he kind of opened the door for lots of other explorers.
Yeah, and he was the one that kind of kickstarted the Columbian Exchange, which was the exchange of materials and diseases, like later on diseases. Like from the old world to the new world, there was stuff like pigs, horses, cows. And then the new world brought over like spices and
Lots of
tomatoes and potatoes and a lot of vegetables and fresh fruits.
And catfish.
Yeah, and catfish.
Well, one big thing that the old world brought over were guns, and that's what allowed them to take over so quickly with so few men, because they had this advanced technology which the Aztecs and the other Native Americans didn't have. So then they were more powerful with this artillery that would just destroy them. And it also made them sometimes, I think, they mistook the foreigners for gods because of their power with these giant booms and then they just get struck dead. So that really helped a lot, because as soon as your perception is warped of something, it's really easy to just be controlled.
Yeah, that's right. So in like just the huge advantage of guns and horses. So there's a story of Hernan Cortez, who was one of the conquistadors. He was taking over South America, and he only had 200 men, about 200 men, and they had guns and horses, and he took over like 2,000 of the
The Incas?
Incas. Yeah, just because he had this huge advantage. All right, so now we're going to go to our question and answer part of our podcast. Anna, could you start us off with the first question?
Sure. So when did the Spanish first arrive in the Americas?
So the Spanish first arrived in the Americas in 1492, when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue under the Spanish flag, and he landed in the Caribbean. So his first landing was on an island known as Hispaniola. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. Which comprises of modern-day Dominican Republic in Haiti. So his voyages were what motivated other explorers to go to the Americas, and it just kind of started off the entire exploration in the Americas,
Hmm.
and also opened like trade routes to Asia to trade the things from America to Asia.
All right. Who were some of the key Spanish explorers in the Americas?
There are some of the key Spanish explorers are Hernan Cortez, who conquered the Aztec Empire in modern day Mexico, Francisco Pizarro, who led the conquest of the Inca Empire in Peru, Juan Ponce de Leon, who explored Florida, Vasco Nunez de Balboa, who was the first European to reach the Pacific Ocean through the Isthmus of Panama. And some of these Spanish explorers were also called conquistadors, and they kind of were the ones who conquered the land that they found in South America and America.
And like they led the expeditions and
Yes.
were in charge of groups of people.
Hmm.
Interesting.
So, like, what was the role of the Catholic Church in the Spanish colonization of Americas?
The Catholic Church played a major role in the colonization of the Americas. Spanish missionaries such as the Franciscans, Dominicans, and Jesuits sought to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. The church also influenced Spanish colonial policies and was deeply involved in education and the establishment of missions throughout the New World.
It's like they were also missionaries in the New World. So, aside from conquering and collecting all the items, they weren't there to also just convert people.
Basically, yeah. Well, how did the Spanish conquer large indigenous empires like the Aztecs and the Incas?
So the Spanish could conquer them so easily just because they had huge advantages. They have lots of new military technology, strategies, and uh, other
They
like
also had alliances with rival indigenous groups,
alliances. Yeah,
like they if they were trying to conquer this one part of South America, they would go to the rivals of that particular group and try to be allies with them so they could conquer the uh, group together.
and also I don't know if we already talked about it, but just diseases. So the with the Spanish, they also brought lots of different diseases like smallpox and other things like that to the New World, and that the people in the New World hadn't built up immune systems against those diseases, so they just all got really sick.
Yeah. So what was the encomienda system?
Well, I think that system was like a labor system which the Spanish crown had instated to the conquistadors to allow them to extract labor from the indigenous populations, and but then they would give those natives protection and Christian instruction. So they would teach them and like protect them. And so even though they were working as kind of slaves, they were being protected and given things so they could survive. And they were also taught.
Mm. It was also a bad thing, though, right? Because it kind of led to the exploitation and harsh treatment of
Yeah.
indigenous people,
It
too,
was
right?
forcing upon religion to them and also just taking advantage of them.
Mm.
So it wasn't the greatest, but yeah.
So it's just a way for them to like manage the like indigenous people,
Yeah.
like for like slave labor, different things that they wanted them to do. Okay.
I think so.
So, how did the Spanish influence language and culture in Americas?
Well, the Spanish language and like Portuguese language is now the official languages of these South American countries nowadays. So the Spanish really just they taught their language and it just spread around. So now all the people in South America mostly speak Spanish or Portuguese, which is just culturally they lost all their languages to the Spanish. But also it's also a bit integrated into Spanish, but mostly it was just that.
Yeah, but they also introduced like European art, music, architecture, and religion. So it was a good thing.
So, what were the major economic activities in the Spanish colonies?
Well, the major economic activities in Spanish colonies included mining, which they mined like silver, gold, that were important resource extracted by the Spanish, especially the place in Mexico and Peru.
Hmm.
Agriculture with crops like sugarcane, tobacco, later coffee, being central to the economics. And cattle ranching, the other form of livestock farming, also became significant over time. These three things are the most important things to the Spanish colonies.
What was the impact of Spanish colonization on indigenous populations?
Well, the population got a lot smaller because of all the diseases like smallpox and influenza and measles. It like wiped out like 90% of all the indigenous people.
Population decline, something like that.
Yeah. Also like cultural destruction because all the cultures and religions and languages were all taken over by the Spanish because the Spanish just overthrew all the kings and priests and just took over the people and taught their languages and taught about their religion and taught about their culture.
Yeah, and there was also like forced labor and slavery, where like uh, a lot of the indigenous people of South America and North America were forced into labor through systems like the encomienda, or they were like literally just slaves for the Europeans. And then there was also land loss, where like most of the indigenous people were displaced from their ancestral lands to make way for the Spanish settlers.
So overall, the impact was like very devastating for the indigenous populations, right?
Yeah.
Very devastating.
They also lost a lot of land, which isn't cool because it was taken over by the Spanish.
Yeah, they also just lost like their cultures and just other things. Just
The families.
yeah,
Did you know actually the African slaves were brought into Spanish Americas?
Really?
Yeah, they were taken in from ships going to Africa. They were like so in Africa they would have different warring states and they would capture war prisoners and then they would sell them off to the colonizers and they just let them take them over the sea and then so those people from Africa were taken to the Americas and forced to do slave labor also.
wow.
That's kind of harsh.
So you just like need more slaves.
So it kind of became a big triangle between Europe, Africa, and the Americas.
That's
Oh,
crazy
okay.
because you never think of like there being slaves in South America. Like every single time you think about slaves, I feel like you think about North America and just how oppressive it was over there. But it's interesting that they also had them in South America too. But I mean, it makes sense because
Yeah,
they are both
of course.
American.
Yeah, they would make them do like the harsh labor, like mining and like planting and just working out in the hot sun and doing all the tedious work.
So there's this thing called the Treaty of Tordesillas. I think that's how you pronounce it. So what was the significance of that?
Well, it's kind of like an agreement between the Spanish and the Portuguese.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Me too.
I think it was like the Pope was trying to divide these newly discovered lands outside Europe between Spain and Portugal. So the division granted Spain most of the Americas, while Portugal received territories in Africa, Asia, and Brazil.
So basically, it was like an agreement between the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal,
Yeah.
like so that they could know where each
Where they're-
country
yeah.
could explore.
So what was the Spanish colonial administrative system like?
So they were organized into administrative regions called viceroyalties. And the most important were the Viceroyalty of New Spain, which included Mexico and Central America, and the Viceroyalty of Peru, which was just South America. So these were governed by viceroys who represented the Spanish crown. And local governance were handled by officials known as the audiencias and the cab I don't know how to
The
say that.
cabildos.
Cabildos,
Cabildo.
which were municipal councils. So there's this. What's the Black Legend?
Black legend.
It was like kind of a propaganda campaign by Spain's rivals, particularly like the English and the Dutch, which just portrays the Spanish as like brutal and cruel colonizers. While the Spanish did commit atrocities, the Black Legend exaggerated their actions to tarnish their reputation and justify other European powers of colonial ambitions.
So it's just like brought up as Spanish's rivals brought it up
Yeah, to just
to
make them look bad, so
make them look bad. Okay.
the English and Dutch would look good while they colonized.
So then it could make like their own
So the English and
actions
the
look better.
so the English and the Dutch
Yeah.
would like be able to colonize more, and they wouldn't have to fight the natives as much.
So, how did the Spanish colonization affect trade routes?
So the Spanish colonization like significantly altered global trade routes because the extraction of precious metals from the Americas, especially silver, contributed to the development of a global trading network, so known as the galleon trade, which linked the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And the Spanish fleets transported silver to Europe, and from there it flowed into Asia, like especially China, in exchange for silk, porcelain, and just other stuff like fireworks from China.
So it was like this the Spanish kind of extended the trade from like the Silk Road, Spice Road, but all the way across the sea to the Americas. So like it was a giant trade route between all the different continents.
So, Spanish is like the center of the trading routes that we trade all stuff, kind of.
Well,
They
they were
kind
in
of
Europe
were in
and in
control.
like the Americas. They had two posts in the whole trade route, which was really useful for them to make more money.
So what do you think the role of mestizos in Spanish colonial society? What was the role of that?
Well, the mestizos were people of mixed Spanish and indigenous descent, and they formed a significant portion of the population in Spanish America, actually. They occupied an intermediate social class, often serving as like small landowners, artisans, or laborers. Over time, the mestizo population grew and became a key part of Latin America's society and culture. They were pretty significant.
They were like a
Okay.
bridge. They were like a
Cool.
bridge between the Spanish and the indigenous tribes because they were half Spanish, half indigenous, which helped them kind of fit in but not fully fit in both cultures. But they could understand both.
How did the Spanish colonies eventually gain independence?
The Spanish colonies in Americas gained independence through like a series of revolutionary wars in the early 19th centuries. Leaders like Simon Bolivar, is that right? In South America, and Miguel Hidalgo in Mexico, and Jose the San Martin played crucial roles.
My,
Then,
They were just like different leaders who like led kind of
yeah.
revolutions again.
Jose, it's
Oh,
Jose.
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 it's okay.
Yeah, the Napoleonic Wars in Europe weakened Spain's abilities to control its colonies.
And
And
then,
movements for independence.
so then
Yeah.
the independence was easier to gain because Spanish were already concerned about France in Europe, so they were fighting over there, which weakened their power in America because they had to bring soldiers
And
back
bring soldiers back, which weakened it, made it easier for them to overthrow them.
and rebel. Yeah.
Okay.
So how did the Spanish-American War of 1819 1898 affect Spanish influence in the Americas?
Well, that was a lot later after the trade and like how when Christopher Columbus first went to the Americas. It was like a couple hundred years after, but it was the war marked the end of the Spain's colonial empire in the Americas. And when after its defeat, the United States, Spain, and the remaining territories in the Americas just like it just dispersed. So Cuba and Puerto Rico went to the U.S. and the rest of the other, and Spain just let go of all these places they had control of.
So essentially, the war effectively ended Spain's centuries-long influence in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah,
Am I right?
kind of. But they still influenced it. It's just they weren't there anymore.
And also, as a result of the wars, the United States gained control over Philippines and Guam, because Spanish didn't have control on them anymore, so the U.S. moved in basically.
So after kicking the Spanish out, they became the colonizers.
That's right.
Okay, that concludes our Q&A segment, but Ezra wants to share some Spanish jokes, which may or may not be racist, so prepare your ears. So, you want to start off with a joke, Ezra?
Let's hear it then.
Yeah, 1 minute. Why did the tortilla chip go to the party?
Why?
Because it heard there would be salsa.
Is it a Mexican? That's a Mexican joke.
Okay.
Give us
Wait.
another one.
It's not a Spanish joke.
Why did the Spanish student bring a ladder to class?
Why?
Because he wanted to go to high school
Okay.
That has
and
nothing
climb
to
over
do-
the wall into America.
It's-
Oh, jeez.
What did the tortilla chip say to the taco?
What?
What?
You crack me up.
You guys stop, bro.
Okay. That's okay.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Yeah.
Yahoo.
Yahoo. I'm excited for Cinco de Mayo too.
Okay, so we're gonna end it here, guys, because we're running out of time. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, tell your friends about us, and we'll see you guys next week. Remember, I'm Anna,
I'm Levi.
I'm Emmett.
I'm Ada.
I'm Ezra.
and this is the Ancient Cricks Podcast. See you guys next week.
Like
Bye.
and subscribe.
That's a wrap.